The Promise Part 5. Then he lay on the couch with a thin blanket. The springs creaked, but he didn't care. He kept watching the bed until his eyes grew heavy. The last thing he saw was Lena's hand resting outside the blanket. A cough woke him. He hurried to her side, warmed more tea, and knelt beside the bed. Her eyes opened, still sleepy but clearer.
"You're still here," she murmured.
"I said I would be," he replied softly.
She smiled weakly. "You care too much."
"Maybe," he said, "but it feels right." Her smile widened just a little.
"Thank you, Chris."
He didn't answer. He only looked at her, memorizing every small thing. Chris sat on the couch again, half awake, half listening to her breathing. For hours she had seemed calm, but close to midnight her breathing grew uneven. He stood quickly, touching her forehead, burning hot, much hotter than before. Her blanket was damp with sweat, her lips trembling. He whispered her name.
"Lena! Lena, can you hear me?"
Her eyelids moved slightly, but her words came out weak and broken.
"I feel cold."
Chris's heart thudded. He brought another cloth, changed it, and gave her water, but she couldn't swallow. Her hands shook. He looked at his phone, his pulse racing. "Do I call an ambulance? Will that cause trouble for her?" He bent beside her and said softly, "Lena, you need a doctor. I'm taking you to the hospital." Her eyes fluttered open for a moment.
"No, I can't go," she whispered. "I don't have insurance."
"You'll get worse if we don't," he said, trying to sound calm, though fear sat heavy in his throat. "Then I'll use mine," he said. "I have an insurance card from before my life changed. They'll treat you under my name. Please, don't worry." She tried to smile, her lips barely moving.
"You're crazy,"
she murmured, then coughed. "Maybe," he said softly, "but I'm not letting you die here." Before she could answer, her head dropped sideways. He caught her in his arms. Her body was limp. The fever had taken her completely. "Lena! Hey, Lena!" He tapped her cheek gently, panic rising. No answer. Without another thought, he grabbed his phone and called Tom.
"Tom, it's me. I need a favor, now."
"Mark? It's 2 in the morning. I need you to activate one of my cards. Send the code to my phone. Someone's sick." There was silence, then Tom said, "I'll do it, 10 minutes. Chris hung up, called emergency services, gave the address, and sat holding Lena in his arms until he heard the distant siren. When the paramedics arrived, he didn't care how much it would cost. He helped them lift her onto the stretcher. "Please be careful," he said.
"Are you family?"
one asked. He looked at Lena's pale face and said, "Yes." They rushed through empty streets. Chris sat beside her, gripping her hand as the ambulance lights flickered across her skin. He whispered, "Hold on, Lena. Just hold on." When Lena opened her eyes, it was morning. White walls, soft light, the faint sound of heart monitors. For a second, she didn't know where she was. Then she turned her head. Chris was there, sitting beside her bed, his head resting against his arm. He looked exhausted but peaceful. His jacket was crumpled, his hair messy, his eyes closed in half-sleep. The sunlight painted him gold.
"Chris," she said weakly.
His eyes opened at once. Relief washed over his face. "Hey," he said, voice full of warmth. "You scared me last night?" She tried to sit up, but he gently helped her. His hand slipped gently around her waist. Her warmth met his touch, soft, fragile, yet alive. For a heartbeat, the world went silent. Her eyes lifted to his, calm and luminous, and something inside him trembled. He felt the pulse in his fingertips, a rush like electricity flooding his chest. She felt the steady strength in him, unaware she was awakening a tenderness he'd never known before.
"Easy. You fainted. The doctors said it was an infection, but you're fine now. Fever's gone down."
She looked around. The room was wide, clean, bright, far too elegant for someone like her. Lena looked around the room, worry clouding her eyes.
"Chris, this place is too expensive. I can't pay for it." He smiled gently. "It was my father's insurance. We shared it, and I'm still a beneficiary. I added your name. Everything was cleared before you woke up."
She exhaled slowly.
"I was worried, Chris."
The way she said his name softened something deep in him.
It wasn't just gratitude in her voice, it was trust, quiet and disarming. He looked at her and felt his heart surrender without meaning to. As her words faded, Chris felt a sudden tremor inside him. The warmth in her voice, the way she looked at him, it unraveled something steady within. Could this be love? He wondered, his heart pounding. Almost without thinking, he leaned closer, his hand finding hers. The touch felt both forbidden and natural, as if he'd known her forever. The closeness scared him, yet deep inside, he didn't want it to end. It must have cost a lot. He shrugged gently. You can pay me back by getting better. She smiled faintly. That's not fair. It's fair to me, he said. You've already done more for me than you know. They fell into soft laughter, light and easy. For a few moments, the heaviness of the night melted away. A nurse came in, checked Lena's temperature, smiled. Fever's gone. You're a lucky lady, she said. He didn't move all night. You must mean something special. Lena looked at Chris, her cheeks warming. He's just stubborn, she said quickly. The nurse winked and left the room. Chris called Mr. Lee soon after. She's in the hospital, he explained. It was bad, but she's okay now. I'll stay here till she's discharged. Mr. Lee sighed. You did right. Don't worry about work today. I'll manage. When Chris hung up, he found Lena watching him. Mr. Lee sounded worried, but he said to tell you he wants his best waitress back tomorrow. She smiled, her eyes soft. I'll try not to die next time. He laughed, the sound echoing warmly between them. They shared breakfast, hospital porridge, toast, and orange juice. It wasn't much, but somehow it felt special. They talked quietly about small things. The rain, the cafe, how she once burned a sandwich so badly Mr. Lee called it modern art. When she laughed, it was a sound that felt like morning itself. Chris looked at her across the tray and thought, if I could freeze this moment, I would. By afternoon, the doctor came in. You can go home today, he said kindly. Just rest for a few days. Lena nodded gratefully. When they left the hospital, the afternoon sun was fading. Chris walked Lena home, their steps quiet, their shadows touching on the pavement. When they hugged goodbye, he felt the warmth of her against him, a calm that reached deeper than words. She smiled faintly and said, I'm fine now, really. But Chris shook his head. I'll come back this evening, he promised. As he walked back toward the shelter, he already missed her, the sound of her voice, the light that followed wherever she stood, to be continued. He walked slowly, unwilling to rush the strange peace that had settled over him. Why do I wish she was still watching? He wondered, half amused by his own longing. The thought made him smile in spite of himself. The shelter waited at the end of the block, small and dimly lit. Its metal door creaked as he pushed it open, releasing the familiar scent of soap and old paint. Inside his narrow room, the single bulb flickered above a thin bed and a cracked mirror. The space was barely large enough for a man his height to turn around, yet tonight it did not feel as suffocating as before. A faint smile touched his lips. The billionaire had traded marble floors for peeling walls, and somehow, in losing everything, he had found a quiet he hadn't known he needed. He undressed and stepped into the shower. The cubicle was so small he could touch both walls with his elbows. Water sputtered from the pipe in uneven spurts, sometimes warm, sometimes cool. He let it fall across his shoulders and closed his eyes. Steam blurred the air, and in that blur her image appeared. Lena's face resting against the pillow, her lashes trembling when she had whispered his name. The memory deepened. His hand around her waist as he helped her sit up, the tremor of her breath against his skin, the soft rise and fall of her chest against his, when she had leaned into him for that brief, wordless hug before he left. The echo of her warmth lingered now, as real as the water touching his skin. He drew a slow breath and leaned his head against the tiled wall. What is she doing to me? He thought. And he reached for his phone on the sink. His thumb paused over the screen before sliding to a hidden folder, a private playlist filled with songs he had written long ago but never shared. They were the kind of melodies that belonged to quiet moments, to thoughts too tender to explain. He pressed play.
Didn't know my heart could open this wide. You came like sunlight through my rain. touch the quiet corners of my pain. Every time you smile, I lose control. You're the fire waking up my soul. I never dreamed that love could be so real. Now every breath you take is what I feel. You reach me deeper than I've ever known. You teach me how it feels to find my home. My heart kneels down, it can hardly breathe. Oh baby, you reach me. Your laughter heals the scars I hide. Your touch disarms the fear inside. I was strong but empty, cold and free, till your gentle spirit humbled me. At your gaze I tremble, at your touch I fall. Never knew a woman could break my walls. Now I'm lost, but I don't wanna leave. 'Cause baby, you reach me when I can't explain. You reach me through the joy and pain. You've changed my world so tenderly, oh darling. Oh, you reach me. You reach me. You reach me. Oh, you reach me.
When Chris stepped out of the shower, the room was still hazy with steam, carrying the faint scent of soap and the quiet rhythm of the song that had just faded. He wiped the mirror with his hand and stared at the blurred reflection staring back. His hair was damp, but his eyes were calmer now, softer, as if the water had washed away something heavier than dust. He sat on the edge of the narrow bed and unlocked his phone. 2 missed calls blinked on the screen. Tom. Just the name was enough to pull him back toward the world he had tried to leave behind. He sighed, leaned against the wall, and returned the call. "Mark," Tom said immediately, his tone brisk but laced with relief. Then he caught himself and laughed. "Oh, sorry. I mean, Chris." Chris smiled, shaking his head. "You'll never get used to that." "Hard to," Tom replied, chuckling. "Sometimes I forget you're hiding behind that name." Their laughter softened the air for a moment, before Tom's voice turned serious again. "You've been impossible to reach. Your stepmother's been calling board members, even hired security to track you down. She says it's about the inheritance papers, but I don't believe that." Chris rubbed the back of his neck, feeling the faint heat left by the shower. "Let her look," he murmured. "She can have the meetings, the lawyers, all of it. I'm done fighting over my father's companies. I built my own. She can take whatever brings her peace." There was a pause, a faint crackle of traffic on Tom's end. "You sound different, Mark. Happier somehow. Did something happen out there?" Chris hesitated, his gaze drifting toward the water stain above the bed. In his mind rose the image of Lena, her tired smile, the calm in her eyes, the touch that had steadied his grief. He almost said her name, but stopped. "Someone needed help," he said softly. "I was in the right place to give it." Tom laughed quietly. "You? Helping someone again? That's the old Mark Davis I remember." "Maybe," Chris replied, smiling faintly. For a moment, neither spoke, the silence between them filled only by distance and unspoken memories. Then Chris straightened. "Listen, I need one of the backup cards reactivated, the private account. I might need to pick up a few things." "Consider it done," Tom said. "You'll have the code in minutes. And the silver laptop in my office. Wipe it clean, install the security software, and send it to me. I'll text the address." "Still paranoid?" Tom teased. "Careful," Chris corrected gently. "Old habits die hard." Tom's tone softened. "All right, my friend, just stay quiet. The more she digs, the closer she'll get." She won't find me, Chris said, his voice steady. They exchanged good nights, and the call ended with a click. He leaned back, the thin mattress pressing against his spine, and let out a slow breath. The world outside hummed softly, distant cars, night air moving through the city he no longer belonged to. Somewhere between the memory of water, the warmth of music, and the echo of that call, he felt the pull of two worlds, one of noise and power, the other of peace and truth. He looked toward the fogged window, where the city lights blinked like patient stars. "Let her have everything," he whispered. "None of it matters." What mattered was a single face, a voice that had begun to heal the ache he thought was beyond repair. Setting the phone beside him, he closed his eyes, already imagining the sound of Lena's laughter. When Chris left, Lena stood quietly by the door, listening to the faint echo of his footsteps. The apartment felt oddly still, yet full. His presence lingered like warmth that hadn't quite left the air. She decided to make something light for herself, something that tasted like home. In a few minutes, she had a pot of porridge simmering on the stove, its soft scent filling the room with comfort. As she poured it into a mug and took the first sip, the heat spread through her body, and with it came sudden flashes of the morning, how Chris had steadied her by the waist when she was weak, how close he had been, the quiet way his eyes had searched hers. For a moment, she let the memory stay, her lips curling into a faint smile before she shook her head and whispered, "Stop it, Lena," snapping herself out of the thought. After finishing, she tidied the table and went to the bathroom to splash her face with cool water. Her reflection in the mirror looked brighter, her skin no longer pale with fever. She brushed her hair down and whispered, "Better now," almost to herself. Her phone buzzed. A message from her parents. "We haven't heard from you, my girl. 4 days is too long. Are you well? We wanted to hear your voice." Her heart softened instantly. She called back, waiting for the familiar voices, but the line didn't go through. The message repeated, "The number you have called is not available." She tried again, and again the same thing. She sighed. "Maybe the battery is dead," she said gently, "or maybe it's raining at home again." She placed the phone on the table and looked around the room. Her eyes fell on the shawl Chris had left behind, draped carelessly over the chair near the door. She walked over, picked it up, and folded it neatly. The faint scent of his cologne lingered in the fabric, clean, calm, a little like cedar wood. Without thinking, she brought it closer and breathed it in. The scent pulled her somewhere else, back to the hospital, to that quiet morning when he had touched her waist to steady her, his voice soft and careful, his eyes holding hers just long enough for her heart to skip. She smiled, shaking her head. "Lena, what are you doing?" she whispered, laughing under her breath. She placed the shawl carefully on the back of the chair and sat down again, sipping what remained of her porridge. The apartment was peaceful now, touched only by the sound of the kettle cooling and the faint hum of the night outside. She looked around and thought of how strange life could be, how one stranger's kindness could make the walls of a small room feel like safety. When Chris saw her standing there in that white and black dress, her eyes glowing like soft light, his words vanished. He just moved closer and hugged her, not planned, just pure. And when Lena hugged him back, the world went still. "Mark, Chris," she whispered. He smiled faintly, breath trembling. "Lena, how can you say my name like that and expect me to let go?" Their eyes met, and in that quiet, something deeper than words passed between them. "To be continued tomorrow at 6 p.m. I'd love to hear what time it is for you and where you're tuning in from. Thanks." The Promise Part 8. When Chris stepped inside, Lena barely had time to breathe before he drew her into his arms again. For a moment, neither of them moved. His chest rose against hers, steady and sure, and the warmth of the embrace made the small room feel like the only safe place left in the world. When he finally pulled back, his hands were reluctant, one still resting lightly at her waist as if he had forgotten to let go. Lena didn't remind him, she only smiled, the faintest blush coloring her cheeks. He cleared his throat. "Have you eaten?" I drank some porridge, she said. No appetite. And you? I could order something. Then, almost shyly, or maybe you could make me that African porridge you talked about. She laughed. You've never tasted it? Never. But tonight I'm ready to try anything new. She turned to the stove. He stayed close behind her as she poured water into the pot. Steam rose between them, curling through the air. The scent of maize meal and butter wrapped the kitchen in comfort. From where he stood, he could see the soft glow of her skin in the light, the warm brown that caught every flicker of gold from the lamp. He thought how he had never stood this near to a woman who carried sunlight in her color. Lena felt his gaze. She didn't need to turn to know it was there. It made her heart beat faster, though she kept stirring as if nothing had changed. When the porridge thickened, she handed him a spoon. Here, taste. He blew on it, tasted, and smiled. I didn't know food could feel like kindness. Chris lifted the spoon slowly, tasting the porridge with quiet curiosity. It was warm, smooth, different from anything he remembered. He couldn't recall the last time he had porridge. It felt like something from another life. Thank you so much, he said softly, his voice low, sincere. Lena smiled, watching him as he ate. After a few bites, Chris chuckled. Are we only having porridge? She laughed gently. No, I told you. I'll cook something. When he finished, he rinsed his mug and opened the fridge. Empty shelves, no juice, no vegetables. Let me go buy a few things, he offered. Lena pointed to a small glass jar with coins and folded bills. Take some from there. He shook his head. I have a little money with me, she insisted, but when she turned away, he only pretended to take a few coins. He couldn't bring himself to use her savings. She needed them more than he did. He smiled faintly, pocketing nothing, and left for the store with quiet resolve. Minutes later, he returned, not just with juice, but bags of fruit, vegetables, and rice. You went for juice, she said, amused, but came back with a whole store. He shrugged. A sick person needs every healthy thing. She laughed, shaking her head. Together they cooked, her rinsing dried fish, him slicing onions. The smell of tomato and garlic filled the air. Their arms brushed sometimes, neither pulled away. When the stew simmered, he found an old dice game and a small book from his bag. Let's play while we wait, he said. Rules? She asked. Throw the dice. Each number matches a question. Miss your guess. You answer or face a punishment. Lena grinned. Deal. Chris guessed the number 6. The dice rolled, bounced once, and stopped at 3. Lena laughed softly. You failed, so you answer the question from the book. She flipped the small notebook, finger sliding down the page until she found the line. Number 3. She looked up at him, teasing but curious. Are you married? And if yes, how many children do you have? Chris chuckled, shaking his head. That's an easy one. No wife, no children, not even a cat. Lena smiled, a faint warmth spreading in her voice. I'm glad you're not married. The words lingered between them longer than she intended. Chris's smile slowed, turned gentler. She's glad, he thought. Something inside him loosened, like breath he'd held too long. The soft light caught her eyes, and he felt the pull again, deep and unguarded. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Then before we move forward, what about you? Are you married, Lena? Do you have children? Her lips curved in a shy laugh. No, not married. No children either. They looked at each other, too long, too openly, and both laughed to break the silence. But when their laughter faded, Chris was still smiling, unable to hide the happiness curling in his chest. So she's free. Lena's heart fluttered under the quiet intensity of his gaze. The way he looked at her made her chest feel warm, almost trembling. She turned away quickly, cheeks flushed. I need to go to the bathroom, she murmured, rising before he could answer. Inside the bathroom, Lena leaned toward the mirror, her reflection glowing. She pressed a hand to her cheek, smiling at herself, whispering, Stop it, Lena, even as she felt the warmth spread deeper. The Promise Part 9. When Lena came back from the bathroom, her face still held a quiet glow she could not hide. She had just sat down when her phone started to ring on the table. The screen flashed "Mama Home." Her heart softened instantly. She glanced at Chris with an apologetic smile. "It's my mother. Give me a minute." He nodded. "Of course," she answered in her native tone, her voice suddenly lighter. "Mama, how are you?" Her mother's voice filled the room, faint through distance, but warm and alive. "We have been calling. Your cousin Sandy came here looking for you. She says she needs her money. The one she lent you for the ticket to America." Lena sighed gently, leaning against the wall. "Yes, Mama. I'll send it. Maybe not tonight, but after they pay us in 2 days. In 3 days I will send it to her, I promise. I have been a little sick. That's why I was quiet." Her mother's tone softened immediately. "Sick? You must take care of yourself, my girl. And there is something else. The landlord is asking again for the rent, and your father's medicine is almost finished." "I'll send for the upkeep, too," Lena said firmly. "When they pay me, I'll send enough for rent and for Dad's hospital checkup. Please make sure he goes this time." "All right," her mother replied, the sound of relief in her breath. "But you must also eat well. Keep warm. Don't push yourself too hard." Lena smiled. "I will, Mama. I love you, my daughter Lena." "I love you too, Mama. Greet Dad for me." "He went to see your uncle, but I will tell him. God keep you safe, my child." Chris had been sitting quietly, pretending to wipe the table, though his mind had followed every word. He could tell by the strain in her voice that money was tight, that she carried more weight than she let anyone see. She came back to the table and gave him a small smile. "Sorry, family talk." "Everything okay?" "Yes, just they worry." The air between them stilled again as the aroma of fish stew filled the room. Chris looked toward the pot and said, "We'll continue our game after dinner." She nodded, grateful for the distraction. They served the food together and began to eat. The warmth of the meal eased the quiet. Then Chris's phone rang. It was Mr. Lee. "Chris," the old man said, "are you coming in tomorrow?" "Yes," Chris replied quickly. "I'll be there in the morning. I'll also work for Lena, as we agreed." Across the table, Lena's spoon paused mid-air. She looked at him, a little puzzled, but said nothing. "All right," Mr. Lee said. "Don't be late." "I won't," Chris promised, then ended the call. Lena tilted her head. "You'll work for me? I didn't know you and Mr. Lee had discussed that." Chris met her eyes calmly. "You need to rest, Lena. Your body's still recovering. Let me handle the week." Chris could tell from the way Lena's eyes lowered that her thoughts were elsewhere. Though she tried to smile, the lines of worry around her mouth betrayed her. He left his seat quietly and came to kneel before her. She looked startled, but his calm, steady gaze held her still. His voice carried that deep, soothing tone that reached straight into her heart as he begged her to listen. He told her she needed to rest, that her fever had been stronger than she thought, and that her body had not yet caught up with her courage. He spoke softly, yet every word carried warmth and gravity. He admitted that he had already spoken to Mr. Lee without asking her, that he had promised to work in her place for the week and asked for her forgiveness. It was not because he wanted to stop her from working, he said, but because he cared too deeply to watch her harm herself again. His words shook her more than she expected. The sincerity in his tone, the gentleness in his eyes, it was unlike anything she had felt before. She told him quietly to stand, but he refused until she accepted to rest. Her chest tightened as she whispered that she needed the money, that she had people back home waiting for her help. He simply looked up at her, patient, unmoving, and she felt something inside her give way. When they moved to the couch, his presence filled the small room like calm air after rain. He asked how much she needed, and she tried to smile it away, saying she could not ask him for money. But he told her he still had some savings, that he could sell his golden watch and help her clear what was pressing. She was touched, yet firm, telling him that he should keep his watch and use the money to find a better place to live. The way she said it, worried for him, left him speechless. He had not expected her to think of his comfort before her own. He smiled faintly, promising that tomorrow after work he would sell both watches and rent a small room nearby. She mentioned a house across the street with a room available, and he nodded thoughtfully. Then he asked about her apartment. Lena explained softly that Mr. Lee had given it to her after the woman she had lived with threw her out, that it once belonged to his niece in Canada. Chris listened, realizing just how kind Mr. Lee truly was. Lena smiled as she said she had never met a more generous man, and Chris found himself thinking the same about her. They decided to return to their meal, but when she turned, she caught him still gazing at her. For a long moment neither spoke, and something unspoken passed between them. Then she broke the silence and told him she would accept his help, her voice quieter now, more tender. He asked gently if the phone call earlier had been about her debt. She smiled, teasing that he had been listening. He admitted it softly and told her he deserved to be punished for that, which made her laugh, the sound lighting the room again. She told him she couldn't owe him money both at home and here. He only smiled and asked if she had ever given something freely to another person. When she nodded, he reminded her of the food she had shared, of the kindness she had shown to strangers. He asked her to accept his help in that same spirit, to receive without guilt. She looked at him with a small laugh and said he had pinned her down with his word. He smiled again, saying it was settled then. Tomorrow her debt would be cleared and she would rest without worry. Overwhelmed by everything he had just said, Lena reached out and hugged him. For a moment he held her close, feeling her heartbeat against his chest, the scent of her hair faintly sweet. Quiet and full of thoughts neither dared to speak, yet something between them had already changed. The night had deepened, but so had the warmth that bound them, silent and strong as the rain outside. Comment the promise, Part 10. If you have shared and watched till the end, thank you.